And
So yeah, is there anything we can do about everything everywhere all at once to start this? I thought it'd be kind of funny to do that as like because you asked me like, do you want to talk about this or this or this? And I was like, everything everywhere all at once. Let's talk about
should I put that t-shirt? You got that? You got my
Well, here, I was gonna say I'm saving it for the video though, because I want to show it off. So anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, let me go show it off too.
We can be the Bobbsey twins. Hey, y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. It has been a while, but I'm back with Scott Walter again. It's good to be back with you. And as we noted in the intro, we are actually wearing the same shirt, single stage to orbit, Starship to orbit, 2 weeks, although we need to like X that out and put 6 to 8 weeks now because Elon just changed that time. But this is Scott's idea. Dan did it for the t-shirts, but you can check out the link in the description and get one of these yourself. All these cool new t-shirts. But thank you, Scott, for being here and also for the t-shirt idea.
However, even if the launch is 6 to 8 weeks, I'm sure if you order today, you'll get these in 2 weeks.
There you go. And a real 2 weeks, not
a real 2 weeks.
Yep. Not Elon's 2 weeks. So there you go. Yeah. So go ahead and order for it. So I think we're going to do everything everywhere all at once today. We're going to look at the everything bagel. We're going to talk about electricity standards. We're going to talk about superchargers. We're going to talk about right-hand turns. I think you wanted to talk about ride-alongs also.
I forgot about that. Why not?
Oh yeah, well let's start with that since that was your idea. I think you tweeted that this morning or maybe last night. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, late last night, and it's got picked up by a few people because I tagged them that of course when we go on these drives and something goes wrong, we get a disengagement, we get a chance to do a recording, and it seems like you lose a lot of context. And I think there are a lot of us that we know there at these routes where we have a lot of disengagements or these edge cases we're having to deal with, and sometimes if we would get someone from in the FSD team that would come out and just do a ride along. So they should just go on a trip, join one of us for a day, and then we just kind of show them what we think are all the issues are so they understand the context and what's going on. And so that would just be going after the edge cases, begin to find that. There could be a variety of ways of doing it. One is that they just sort of know there's some people out there that are doing some really interesting things in the testing. Or maybe they start looking at all the reports. It's like, wow, we're getting a lot from like either this individual or from this area, this particular geographic area. There's something challenging. Why don't you go in? And we can either, now or later look at what are some of my typical edge cases that I've been running into that we were discussing the other day, I think in a couple of Twitter threads and maybe even in Discord.
Right.
Everyone like Dirty Tesla, you, me are having issues with it, just like doing right turns when it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
Something I've referred to, I've got a famous one around here I call Scott's non-right turn as opposed to Chuck's left, where it keeps on insisting to take a right turn that it's not supposed to, even though the navigation is going straight. And other people have been noticing the same thing, that even though the Navi is saying go straight, suddenly it decides to get in a lane, which is just going to force you to go over. And I've definitely got some clips, and I noticed that some of these actually got worse with the last release, 11.4.2, especially in highways, which didn't make any sense to me. Like you're on the highway and it knows it's supposed to go straight and it decides, I'm going to take this exit over here.
Yeah.
And it did it to me the same day that it was like the first test drive I did with it. And it did it within a space of a couple of miles. So there are 2 indications like that. And yesterday I had some similar ones, plus my famous right turn, which it just gets confused. It's one of these that it's well marked. Everyone knows about it. Even the tourists know you got to get over to the left lane if you want to continue to go straight. But FSD just doesn't get the hint, and it says, and even though it's been camping out in the left lane, like going along the left lane, at some point says, you know what? I feel like just getting over the right now. And like, no, it's the wrong time. And then you'll try coaxing it over, and then it'll come back. You try coaxing it, it'll do that, and then eventually say, okay, let's see what it does. And it just parks itself in there and gets down there and gets confused and doesn't know what to do. So I've got a clip kind of showing that, and it had been fixed for a while, but now it's like kind of back to, it just wants to stay right, which is ironic because it's not staying in the right lane where you're actually on an open highway.
Right. I actually had an experience driving home, and we took a route that I'm not familiar with, and it looked like it was indicating there was like a fork, and it looked like the nav was indicating that you were supposed to veer left, and it was in the right lane. And I was like, well, it'll get over eventually. and it just went right off the right exit and then had to reroute and go back around and figure out. So, that was one of those cases where I was like, well, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
So I have a theory. I think we were talking about this earlier just on the phone, but that maybe this is something that Tesla is working on under the hood themselves. They're redoing the navigation, the way that it deals with navigation. So I think previously it probably pretty much just took Google's advice rote. Like Google would say, here's where the roads are, here's where the forks are, here's the lane you need to be in. But now what it's doing, because you can still see, like when it does it, it goes like, you need to be in these 2 left lanes, but then it'll be in the right lane all of a sudden. So it's like the full self-driving is no longer attached at the hip to the navigation data. So I'm wondering if they're doing something under the hood, and that's why things tended to break more in 11.4.2 than they did before.
Yeah. Do you want to take a look at this one, John? It's
Sure.
This is like one of the examples. I think.
You
can see this. So this is on the way to the St. Petersburg airport, and you've got 2 highways that are merging here. So I need to stay on 275. So there's a little bit of merge up here, and then there's going to be another split in the highway.
Is that a rock climbing gym over to the right? It says rock climber or rock climb.
Oh yeah, it could be. All right, there we go.
That's fine. So you just wanted to advertise a climbing gym.
Right.
I got you.
So you're coming on up here, and it should be merging in, but at the same time, right after the merge, there is now the exit for 275.
Yes.
Or 375 rather. And it's supposed to go straight. And that there was my finally aborting it. It was like, it was pretty clear it was taking it. It didn't do that. I was like, all right, I don't want to get lost. I got to get my daughter to the airport on time.
Right.
Get the luxury to have to start going around. So that was like a problem with that. And then a little bit later in the same drive, as you near the airport, it gets a little bit confused here. So you go ahead and you need to get in the right lane up here. Okay, so let's say not the rightmost lane, but you need to be in that ramp to get to the airport.
Yeah, where it says ramp only.
Right, and then right here, it starts to veer over. And then I saw what it was doing at that point. I said, all right, you're up to your old tricks. It was very clear. I could see the navigation was doing that. And like, again, I don't want to be late. This is not a shortcut to the airport. That takes you absolutely nowhere. So it didn't know what it was doing, even though the navigation was showing that it should go straight. However, the noodle was showing a completely different way of being able to do it. So that was like 2 examples right there on the same drive. Now, this is another example that I was coming back yesterday, going along here, and I'll just kind of speed it on up. Okay, so 2-lane road, you're just going to go straight here. It's like, I'm just figuring it was just going to go straight. It's gone straight before. And then suddenly it decided, I want to get over in that lane. And then it changed its mind. I let it do that, but you could see it decided to take that off ramp. Like, well, what are you doing? Why are you not going straight?
And this is exactly, there was a route to the hospital where I was going to visit my mom, and it would either take the highway or it would take the surface streets. And every time it took the surface streets, it did exactly that. There was this one sort of off-rampy thing, and it would go over, and then it would go oopsie, and then it would go back on again. So
now this is Scott's non-right turn. Okay. I have to do this all the time. It's a 2-lane road, and you'll see it's constantly marked here that the right turn only in 1,000 feet, because they want all the tourists and everyone to know you got to get over to the left, because this can be very heavy traffic, and if you don't get over to the left in time, you're going to be shut out.
Right.
So it comes along here. It had already put itself over. So, and it was one of those rare times. It was during the daytime with light traffic. A lot of times it's challenging me for to try this because there's so much traffic. I just don't want to get into an accident.
Right.
So there was no one around me. I was looking in my rearview mirror. Great. It's clear. This is the last person to be clear me. I can run this test. Let's see what it decides to do. So it comes on up here. And I want you to, another sign here.
Right. And it forks. It very clearly forks into 2 lanes.
It forks. It gets weird here because you have a bicycle lane here, and now the bicycle lane continues over there, which I think is part of the confusion. Very clear. You want to get out of here. You want to get out of here. A sign there, which of course it doesn't read, but it might be noticing that. So everyone knows you want to get over. It's going in here, and it's like, wow, it really camped itself in. It hasn't figured it out. Then suddenly it realizes there's a mistake. And it gets ready to go over. Now, it could have done this. There was no reason for it to not do this. It's not like it was about to hit a car.
Right.
And then it changed its mind. And then I said, that's it. Then I was like, because that is purgatory. You take that right turn. You cannot get around easily. So I was like, I feel like getting home. but otherwise it was going to go off and take that. So the final
it's really interesting
correction
because it was most of the way into the other lane before it decided to switch back to the other lane.
Yeah. So exactly. So it seemed to me like it could have gone over and then it aborted the last time. So there is a problem with it deferring to the right lane. However, we've noticed ironically that if you're on a 2-lane highway, you'll be driving along and there'll be no traffic and you should be in the right lane. And it'll just decide, and you'll get a little message that says moving out of right lane, and it'll just move over to the left.
Right.
And it's like, okay, for some reason it doesn't prefer the right lane. There's something that it doesn't like about right lanes, maybe road debris or something, and it will just stay left. And everyone's like trying to bring it back to the right, you'll bring it back over. And again, it'll just kind of veer out. So the 2-lane road behavior is terrible. The 3-lane is good. I've noticed that when you go on a 3-lane highway, it seems to know to stay out of passing lanes. It knows to get out of the way of cars coming up behind. But for some reason, it misbehaves on 2-lane roads. And yeah, this is another example of 2-lane road when it splits.
Right. So it's anyway, it is weird because it's definitely taken a backward step on how it was working better before. And that's why I said my working theory at this point, total speculation, is that Tesla is doing something. The full self-driving team has changed the stack in a fundamental way. Because you can see the Google navigation information shows it's going straight, shows you're going left, whatever, and then the noodle will go boop. And so the noodle is not obeying the navigation anymore. So something has gotten disconnected between the two. So is this the one with the pedestrians?
Well, so now this is another example. Is I don't know if you see that there's a flashing yellow there.
Right.
That goes on there. Usually there's like one around here that will warn you that the pedestrians are going in there. So they can hit a button to let you know you got to stop.
Right.
It doesn't seem to understand that. So even if the pedestrian is standing there, it may not know unless the pedestrian is motioning. Now, this is where you need to kind of read the crowd kind of thing.
Right.
That around here, you have situations where you will see people walking and you can already read their intent. I already know they're planning on crossing at this crosswalk.
Right.
I know, I can read the body language. I know they're about to do it. And the question is, do I want to be a jerk and cut them off or actually show a little bit of courtesy? And in the end here, I get the sense the car wanted to go. I had to brake to let them go. So it was kind of a close call. I probably could have done it. It would have been safe. But at the same time, I feel like when you get into some of these more pedestrian areas, you've got to be a little bit calmer going through there and not have to change it to chill mode, but again, kind of read the crowd a little bit.
Well, but I think what we were talking about offline also is important, and that is there's a cultural aspect, because you said I'm in a beach town. In a beach town, you generally try to be chill and let the pedestrians have right away. I'm in a college town, and if I let every pedestrian who looked like they had an intention of going across the street go across the street when it was busy, I'd be there all day and I'd get honked at because people would be like, "Go, buddy!" So it's different cultural environments, and you have to sort of read the room, as you said. You have to know what's about to happen.
And you've got to read the mood of traffic. I mean, sometimes you can tell that traffic is being very aggressive, and that you might have to be a bit more aggressive, or it's a bit more chill. The other thing that I sort of noticed is when I was going down the road, it was deciding to change lanes, which it does pretty well, and it decided to go from the 3rd lane to the middle lane, and this is like on just normal roads, not the highway, and got behind a big truck just because it decided that lane was moving faster. Well, there's a reason why the other lane was backed up, because no one wanted to be behind us. So we come to the red light, I'm behind it, and when the light turns, that truck is going so slow, and everyone else is zipping on by, and eventually pulls out and goes past it. And then we come up to another light, and I was really worried that it was going to decide, I'm going to get back behind the truck again. Now, there's a lot of reasons to not get behind the truck. One, I don't want chips in my car. Two, I can't see around it, and neither can it. So a lot of times you have a smaller vehicle in front of it, you can see a little bit better. And third, it is just slow off the blocks. So this is where we had the idea, is like, it's going to do a bit more than labeling. It's going to start attributing. So when it sees a truck, especially if it sees, well, it's not just a truck, this guy is really slow. So let's mark him as being slow. There might be some other car that it may have noticed it's been swerving. So let's say this guy, watch out for, he's kind of swerving a little bit. Another one might be faster, might be slower. So I'm almost wondering if it would start having memory of certain vehicles, as opposed to saying car. Here, it should be, no, this is the car that just cut me off a minute ago. I got to watch out for him. And I'm wondering if it's going to do that, because certainly we as human drivers do that. we're able to notice it. And of course, we're able to also read something else. We'll pass them and know, oh, the guy's on the cell phone. He's distracted. Really watch out for him.
Right.
At this point, I don't think it's doing that.
There's two things to what you're saying here. Number one, you don't need memory for, if you see a truck with a bunch of cement blocks on the back of it and you're going slightly uphill at a stoplight, you're like, that's not going to leave the blocks quickly. So I'm going to go in the other lane. And I constantly give Tesla feedback for that. If there's an empty lane and there's like 5 cars in the other lane, I'll switch. I'll take it out of autopilot, and then I will give it feedback. Hey, pick the lane that's empty, dummy. Why would you go into this crowded lane? So, but it should be able to just figure out that a truck that has a lot of junk on it is going to be slow. So you should probably not be behind that if possible.
Right.
Then that doesn't require memory. That's just looking at it and going like, oh, that truck is packed. It's going to be slow.
Yes.
Then the other one is memory. If you see somebody who's swerving and then you pass them and for whatever reason you get back behind them again or something, it should be like, oh, that person might be drunk or sleepy or on their phone. I should pass them rapidly if I need to pass them, or stay behind them. Don't do one of those things like the Tesla loves to do and just sit there right by somebody and just, match their speed. That's not the thing you want to do ever for that matter. I mean,
never.
I think it was Chuck Cook said that. He said that the car should exceed whatever your set speed was for a short period of time to get around another car. Don't sit there in its blind spot for an extended
Exactly. You don't pull into a blind spot. So when you're in a 3-lane highway and the middle lane is free and you come in, but there's one in the rightmost lane at that same level, you never do that. I refuse to pull into someone's blind side. So I will speed up a little bit if I have to, or slow down. And a lot of times that's negotiating with the traffic. You look behind and say, well, can I slow down to do it? Or do I really need to speed up? And if it means exceeding the settings, so what? Exceed the settings a little bit because that's safer. The other thing I've noticed on
same thing for trucks too. If you're on the highway, trucks have huge blind spots, and the car will just sit there and very slowly move up the train. You're like, no, go faster, get around this truck.
And you've also got to understand the dynamics that if you don't take care of the vehicles coming behind you quick enough. So I'll be out there and experimenting a little bit, but I would stop doing it because I noticed that I was creating a situation from behind that maybe 2 or 3 cars behind is the guy is really aggressive and he's really angry. And now he's submarining over to the right, coming around that way, flying around everyone up this way. And you're trying to get out of the way and you realize you can't get out of the way because he's going to be coming in quickly. So I cannot diffuse the situation because these other guys are now getting so crazy. So it has to know that if you don't take the action soon enough, it's going to escalate into something really pretty bad. So you've got to be more aggressive. Again, you've got to read the room. You've got to read the mood of the traffic to figure out what's going to be the best situation.
Yeah.
And as far as blind spots, there's one other thing. It's been very good at getting out of the way of cyclists, but there's a few where I'm a little bit worried that it decides that it's, I want to come back over to the right lane for like some bizarre reason. And there's a cyclist going down the bicycle lane. And I'm like, no, you never pull into a right lane when there's a cyclist there, even though you can do it, quote, safely. It's like, I won't do that. Make sure I'm way ahead and do that. So there's those are some of those edge cases. And weekends around here, even during the weekdays, it's like Tour de France here. So, and in both directions. And so if Tesla wants to see examples of what it's like having a lot of these different pedestrians, things kind of going slow, these edge cases, I've got them because I cannot do a drive without many interventions starting almost from my driveway. So that's why I'm saying, I feel like I'm a candidate because I just cannot go very far without doing interventions and checking it out. Maybe I'm being a bit too cautious, but hey, I think at some point you can only take a scientific experiment.
I'll give you another edge case that Tesla fixed one of them, but not the other. And that is trucks. It used to on the highway be dead center on the lane. And if there was a big semi truck next to you, it would stay dead center. And you're just kind of going like, oh gosh, I'm going to hit this thing, or it's going to hit me if it shakes over. So now it moves over. But driving, I think it was again home from Washington, there were 2 motorcycles that were running parallel to each other. So they take up the whole lane. And the car, the Tesla was like, I'm staying dead center in my lane. And I'm like, no, please, for God's sake, move to the left-hand side of the lane as you pass these motorcyclists, because as opposed to a semi-truck where I'm worried about me getting crushed, in that case, I really don't want that guy to swerve or something to happen and we collide, because then I take them out. That's it. They're not going to
exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. You never want to be in anyone's blind spot. You also need
Well,
to
and
have a
also
little bit of lane share.
particularly with motorcycles and trucks, you really want to edge to the other side of the lane. If it's
Right.
another car, you're kind of on even ground, and it's like the worst that's going to happen is you're going to dent each other's, like block or
Right,
something. But
right. But
those two
you know,
extreme cases, you really don't want to be close to that car. So, yeah.
yeah. In slow traffic, it's all right to be next to one another, but I think at some point you get a certain amount of speed. You
Yes.
never want to be, you always want to have something like that. And you always need to have a certain amount of what calls lane share. So
Yes.
the idea that I'm a mile an hour faster than something else, I don't care what the settings are. You've got to say, well, wait a minute, we need to make sure we have at least a differential of 3 miles per hour.
Right.
So we exceed that until we get up there out of the blind spot, and then we can make that maneuver to get out of here to make sure the traffic behind us that wants to get through can then get through safely. So
yeah,
those are like the little things which we as drivers, we are really aware of that, because
right.
we're seeing a cascade of events that can potentially happen.
we as good drivers are aware of it. Now, what always inevitably happens is on every single drive, you're like, what is that person doing in the fast lane going 10 miles an hour under the speed limit, clogging,
Right.
There's always an idiot that's out there doing not the right thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
And again, you have to read that situation to figure out, it's like, okay, he's clogging it. I want to get around him.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm not the only one frustrated. I know there's going to be people behind me frustrated. So I know they're going to be going crazy. So again, I'm like, not only am I worried about that guy, I'm worried about everyone that's behind me. And of course, the old adage on the highway is that, everyone is the worst driver in the world except you.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like they're all idiots, they all know how to drive, but I'm the only one that knows how to drive. And what people might find out is, like, they keep on saying, oh, we don't want to have FSD because this and this. Like, trust me, everyone drives FSD. FSD is smart. You'll all get to your destinations really quick, because there won't be anyone that's driving like an idiot anymore. They'll all be driving rather sanely, and let's say with a certain amount of courtesy and respect for all the other vehicles.
So, this just gave me an idea. So maybe we should meet up in like Jacksonville or something sometime with maybe 30 of our friends who drive Tesla full self-driving. And we should find like a Sunday morning or something and go out in a block together and see if the cars drive better. Just mimic a situation where you've got only robot drivers on the road, no human drivers, and see if they behave much better. Because I think that they would. Yeah. They tend to give good buffers. They tend to be reasonable about pulling into fast lanes and stuff.
Right.
That would be an interesting experiment to try, just a giant block of
so Tesla. We already know it'll be you, me, Chuck Cook, Glenn Cook, not related.
Yes.
And I'm sure a bunch of other, we could probably get Warren to come up too. He's not that far away.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of people I know in Atlanta also who have full self-driving. So we could get some of those folks, and that would be kind of fun. Let's do that. And we could find a big chunk of relatively empty highway on like a Sunday morning when it's not very crowded, and see if we can just sort of like test it. I was imagining the second Matrix movie that they made when they built that whole section of highway off near San Francisco just to do the fight scene in the road. And I'm like, that's what we need. We need that section of interstate, that pretend section of interstate, to just see what it would be like.
Well, maybe there's a section of I-95 in Philadelphia right now that we kind of cut off. Maybe it's like, can we borrow this?
Exactly. Let's go do this for a while. All right. So, okay. So we have two more things. We're going to talk about superchargers, and we're going to talk about electrical standards. Let's talk about superchargers first. Really good news that, ABB, e-mobility, I think, is their subdivision. And then EverCharge and, EVgo, which are all charging solutions, not automobile manufacturers. But this is great because they are going to be supporting the NACS going forward. So that's awesome.
Yes. And this is the first time we've really had a chance to talk about it since I think maybe even the Ford came out with it, that there's been so much news going on with superchargers. And as you mentioned that you had not heard of ABB, I've known them for a long time, partly because they're make robots. They're like sometimes second, third largest robot manufacturer in the world. And there used to be these two large engineering firms, well, three. I mean, there's Siemens, which everyone knows, electrical engineering, power plants, and everything else, big infrastructure projects, trains like the ICE. Ironically, the Intercity Express is called ICE, is the train in Germany, not the internal combustion engine. So ABB was a Swedish company, and Braun Boveri was a Swiss company, and they were kind of bitter rivals for the longest time until they merged. And that happened, I think, around 1989, 1990, and that's what became ABB.
Okay.
And so, they do trains, they do electrical, they do power plants, motors, and the robotics part is like a really small part of their business. They are super competent engineering firm.
Gotcha.
And so when I heard they were doing, I'm like, they know what they're doing. They're going to get it right. So, and Sandy has said the same thing. He says, yep, they work in the cold and they work in the heat, and people should just start working with them. So, but I think they are just doing the infrastructure. They're not EVgo or
But if they
Electrify
build the
America.
components that go into these other chargers,
Yes. And they know how to build those components, and
Right.
they know how to make them robust. They know how to make sure they work in all kinds of conditions, because they do critical infrastructure all the time. They understand when something is mission critical. So hopefully they go that way. People will start to see that. And you're just seeing the dominoes fall. Now, as far as prognostication, I mean, you and I keep on saying that this is not investment advice and that take everything with a grain of salt.
Yes, please, people, do your own research.
And I am so good at predicting the future. So this is why you should be. When Ford came out with their announcement, the first thing I tweeted, okay, who's next? I think we can all agree GM is last.
Right.
And I got like lots of lights, and it was like, of course, that was obvious, So when GM was second, I literally fell out of my chair. Couldn't believe it. However, we had an inkling a few days before when Mary Barra started saying nice things about Tesla and mentioning Tesla. I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? But still, I was caught off guard, because my feeling is they remember that now they're moving away from the Ultium battery, the pouches.
Right.
And they may have realized that the Ultium battery is not so Ultium anymore. And, when they realized there's a big demand for the Hummer, but they could only sell 2. So they're getting production issues. So reality might be setting in. And they're beginning to realize that, wait a minute, this rosy picture that they have been picking, that they have been showing to the stock market for years now, is going to get them in trouble eventually. Now, they may have believed a lot of that stuff because the engineers and everyone was saying that. And maybe those are the engineers that took the buyout. And now the ones that are left are the ones that are like, holy cow, there's a real problem. We've got to tell management. And now they're starting to roll back. And then they're beginning to realize that they're not going to hit these production targets that they've been promising.
Right.
And they have to go that way. And I'm sure Mary and Jim Farley, they probably talk, or at least sometimes, I mean, there's a lot of social things going on in Detroit. So they probably constantly meet. And I'm sure he told her his story about, went on a trip and the kids were kept on complaining and said, why can't we go to the Tesla Supercharger? And think about it. Maybe GM is going to be having the Silverado coming out at the end of this year. There's like a big thing that's it, because the Hummer is not going to be the big seller. They've stopped doing the Bolt. The Lyric and the Celestiq, that's really high end small. It's the volume one is going to be the Silverado. Everyone wants that.
And I think it's the Blazer too, right? The Blazer's the
okay. And they're also coming. But if the situation is that people can't go on road trips with it, it will just be a disaster. And if you get the Cybertruck rolling out at the same time, and it's like, well, wait a minute, this pickup is able to go across country without a problem, but yours were failing. You're hearing Sandy saying, Rivian, please, I mean, we love your car. My wife will only take it shopping. It's an adventure vehicle. We cannot take on adventures. So everyone is realizing you need it. So yes, you and I agree.
Let's add one more thing. Maybe GM, maybe the engineers with the Silverado in particular were like, we're going to get about 150 miles real world range on this sucker. And that's not pulling something.
That could be.
They were like, we're going to have a really good charging network, because otherwise you can't even drive this to the job site and back without running out of battery.
Right. And the reviews will then be, great vehicle, you just can't take it anywhere. And so right now this is the problem with horizontal versus vertical integration, is that your destiny is in someone else's hands. So right now they realize, wait a minute, our destiny is in the wrong hands. We've got to get a reliable charging system. And you and I agree that the NACS is superior from the technology standpoint, but that's not the reason Ford and GM and the others are going in. They're going in because it's all about the network. And the number and the reliability. It really has nothing to do with which one is less clunky than the other. But now you're getting the best of all of it. You're getting the best connector, and you instantly get that. So that's the only way that they survive, is they have to realize, we've got to make sure our customers are happy. And they're probably hearing from everyone. Just like Corey has said. Corey said, you give me a 3-seat SUV electric vehicle, I'll buy it tomorrow. But it has to have NACS, because he wants to be able to make his trip up north and back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple as that.
Well, and the thing that blows my mind is this is the better technology, the better standard. It was developed in 2012. I didn't remember back that far, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's right. I think I was watching 2-Bit Da Vinci, and he said 2012. I was like, how do you get that right that long ago? It's like usually the first couple versions suck. And yes, they did have the Roadster with the screw-in thing that was kind of a mess, but this was basically their first mass market charging standard. And it supports up to what, 900 kilowatts, I think. It does DC and AC on the same pins. It doesn't have a mechanical lock on the actual plug. It's got it on the inside of the vehicle. These are like brilliant things that they did from day one. It's really impressive.
And it's much better. Like when you drop it, it's more robust. It doesn't break if it gets dropped. And also I think the pins that are longer. So when you insert in there, you actually have a much better mechanical connection in there.
And if you look inside, there's a pretty good size amount of plastic before the pin starts. So, if it's raining or something, I always go like, oh gosh, am I going to arc this thing? But first of all, it only does data transmission until it syncs up. But second of all, there's a big plastic gap so that as you're plugging it at the beginning, it's just plastic on plastic until it gets far enough in to make contact. So it's just really, really smart like design. Yeah,
absolutely. It's been well thought out, and it's good to see everyone's going to be going that way, because again, it is so easy to plug in.
Right.
And I think, what was it? Sandy was saying that it's a handle on a handle. Why?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, for the CCS, and then you've got
the CCS was a handle and a handle. It just it was like, you don't need that handle there. You can just go ahead and grab it and put it on in there. Right, it is. So
well, and then it's also got the little button that you have to push, and that button's just going to break. In fact, I've tried it a few times at like airports and things like that when I go to charge and the button's broken. So it's like, well, I can put it on, but it could easily just go bloop and just fall back out again.
And it's very easy to break, because all someone has to do is drop it down there. And you go to a lot of these charging stations and you'll see them on the ground. And I'm not sure if people just pulling off and dropping it on there intentionally, or a lot of times they have a hard time putting it back up there, so it's going to fall down. So it has to be able to survive that a lot. And if you get something that's mechanical in there, sooner or later, I mean, it's just Murphy's Law. It's and if that thing breaks, then the whole thing doesn't function.
Right. Yeah. And if it does, it's scary, because it could arc or do something terrifying like that. While it's charging, because that's the thing, it no longer is locked, and so you can just whoop and just pull it out while it's charging.
And now I think the last thing on the superchargers is that just a few minutes ago, Stellantis said, one of the what sounds like a politician, it's like, oh, we're evaluating NACS and we'll have comments about it later. It's like, you're just starting to evaluate it now, come on. So it to me, it's like they're playing this game of musical chairs, and they're, the music has stopped and they've got a chair right in front of them and they're walking right past it. It's like, come on, Stellantis, get, this is the way to go. GM and Ford have spoken, everyone else has spoken.
Right.
And as you pointed out in your video this morning, that EA is the only one that hasn't, because they're kind of tied with Volkswagen.
Right.
And so Volkswagen has to finally give them the thumbs up and say, okay, I guess it makes sense for you to do it. Otherwise, again, I mean, going back to this game of musical chairs in German, they have this expression, switchen zwei Stühle. In other words, sitting between two chairs. You can't do it. So, which one you're going to get in? You're going to sit over here, you're going to sit over there. So they're kind of caught in the middle.
Right. I think, like, in my mind, unfortunately, the Japanese car makers are kind of irrelevant, because they just don't make enough electric cars right now. So the big one in my mind, even more than Stellantis, is VW. And I have a feeling that VW, and like I said in the video this morning, I think that VW and EA are going to make either a simultaneous announcement or back-to-back, like 2 days back-to-back or something like that. But if and when Volkswagen says that they're going with NACS, that's it, because they sell a lot of EVs. And if they go NACS, then it's just the CCS standard is just completely dead.
At least in North America, and then that means BMW and Mercedes will come over all at the same time.
Oh, you said BMW in German. I like it.
Oh, it's BMW. Sorry, it slips. So the two of them will definitely then say, okay, we have to move, and then it might be because then they're thinking of maybe suppliers or something like that. Doesn't mean they're going to change in Europe. I don't think the Europeans are going to ship unless something else happens. Maybe then Stellantis goes, because they're kind of part of the Peugeot group, and so Peugeot might be like, oh, no, we don't want to, we're going to do whatever we can to resist.
Right.
But Kia, that might happen fast. And there's
Yes.
some indication that they have a different architecture, but I think they can work on it. Because
Right.
at first I thought, well, they're 800 volts right now, so that might be a problem because the superchargers are only 400. But evidently they're really like two 400-volt architectures tied together. So they do have a 400-volt charging possibility. So they would be able to use it. So I guess I'm kind of surprised that they haven't jumped in sooner than everyone else, but I would think that's going to come.
Yeah. Yeah. I had actually, after Ford did it, I predicted that they were going to be next. So I was as shocked as you that GM was the next one up.
Yeah,
I
like, know. Again, they'll be last. So my prediction was they're next. Polestar should be coming in soon, I would think.
Yeah.
That's the other one. And it makes sense for all the other, Rivian and Lucid, because you don't have the numbers out there now. Now is like the best time.
Yes.
If you decide 2 years from now,
gosh, I mean, they can switch it around really fast right now because they're making so few cars, especially a company like Lucid. My goodness, they're kind of like one a day or something.
Yeah, and someone was saying that there was this review, was in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and someone was like, "Oh, America's not ready for EVs because it had a terrible trip cross country." And he took a Lucid, okay.
Right.
And he says, well, it's got great range, but took forever to charge and was really hard finding charging and everything else. Exactly. That's the point.
Right.
And Lucid, and you and I, we went for a test drive in a Lucid.
Yeah.
It's a nice vehicle. It drives really nice. I mean, there's a lot of things. I was more impressed with it. It turned out to be better in the headroom than I expected because I had problems when I was sitting in it before. Right. It's fine. It's the charging infrastructure. Get your charging infrastructure together, and you'll probably find more people will be interested. And I bet that's why a lot of people just decided it wasn't the range anxiety or anything like that that's caused a lot of people to drop their orders. It's been more or less the anxiety, I can't charge this thing.
Yeah. And speaking of that, I am going to reiterate for Tesla owners who are going to be pissed off about the fact that, oh, we're going to have to share with Ford and Chevy and all this stuff now. I'm very strongly believe that there are going to be chargers everywhere. It doesn't have to be like a gas station where you have to dig a big hole in the ground. You have to get permits to stick literally toxic chemicals under the ground. You have to do all this stuff. So you concentrate the gas station into one place and then you have to go to it. EVs, there's electricity everywhere. You just run a couple of lines off at the Kohl's that you want to go to go. In fact, there is one at the Kohl's right now. It's the CCS, but there's a couple of charging stations there and they're free. And so, these places, whether they're superchargers or just lower voltage chargers that just do AC charging, and you offer it to your customers for free, people will go to that store as opposed to other stores because they can plug in while they're there. And so it's not going to be like, oh my God, everyone's going to have to go to this one supercharger in this one area. There's people who are not going on a trip are going to go to local places. I think this is going to be great. And I think that like apartment complexes and stuff will probably start installing a few of them. So it's going to start mitigating that problem of you have to have a house and a garage in order to have an EV. I think that bar is going to get lowered, and people, Tesla owners in particular, who are crying about having to wait in line with other people at these superchargers, I don't think that's going to be as big a deal as they think it is.
Yeah. And the thing about gasoline stations, it's not just the permitting, it's also zoning. There's only certain places you're allowed to have a gas station, and a lot of cities and towns will say not here. So good luck finding a gas station in downtown Manhattan. I mean, there's like, you're looking around, it's like, where are they? It's like, well, there's only certain places you can get gas. So it's almost like having superchargers in downtown Manhattan and finding where that's going to be in a lot of other cities. But now that you have the EV charging, you can do it anywhere. Of course, parking garages are eventually going to have that. I see it as a positive because I just think it means like superchargers are going to be popping up like weeds now. They're going to be everywhere. And just before I think the Ford announcement, or right around there, you saw the Tesla host a supercharger program. Now the businesses can apply for that. To me, that's big because it means they're going to be everywhere. Businesses are going to be fighting to be the first one on the block to get it because they realize not only are we getting the Tesla snobs that are coming in here, we're going to be getting the Ford drivers, and now we're going to get the GM drivers. It's like, wow, it's like you are going to be attracting everyone. I have no problem with that because I think I haven't really had a problem with supercharging. Sometimes it's been close, but I realize the solution to the congestion of superchargers is more superchargers, not less cars that need to charge. And then the other thing that I'm hoping it does is that it spurs, EV Go in ChargePoint and the others to do a better job and get those up and going and running well,
Yeah.
because I would like to take advantage of, and a couple of times I tried using those things, they didn't work. And so it's like,
Right.
everyone's right. But I do know some Tesla owners that will go there because they say it's actually a little bit cheaper. So they can, they will actually use a non-Tesla network
but again,
to get that.
this is the place where they can compete, because rather than competing with the high supercharging places, install yours at shopping malls, install yours at places that Tesla's not very interested in.
Yeah.
And people will go there, especially if you have NACS and Teslas can charge and these other ones can charge.
Which means you can attract both.
You gave me a really interesting thought. Was take a city like Manhattan, and let's say every block there's 2 EV only parking spaces with chargers there. And people are going to be very encouraged to want to switch to EVs because those spots are reserved for electric vehicles and charging. And people are going to be interested in that. So I think that would be a way for cities to also help to support charging. And especially because in a place like Manhattan, unless you garage your car, where are you going to charge it? It's very difficult to do that. So I just think that those are ways to diffuse, just like power generation needs to get diffused onto solar roofs and things like that. Power distribution needs to be diffused out as well. And so this is a way to do that. So it's very exciting, actually.
And the other thing, the whole idea of the host a supercharger program, it's like, it shouldn't just be Tesla that's doing that. All these others just say, okay, we're going NACS and, we'll put it in there. If Tesla won't do it, we'll go ahead and put it in. So they should be the ones that, so I think what you're going to see is a lot more of them are going to start showing up. Right. Which will just, and that means we're going to look back in history and we're going to look at like this was like the real tipping point. Right. And really pin it down to this month. It's going to be like, I don't know if you've ever had a yard where dandelions have taken hold and all of a sudden it's like, there's like dandelions, there's these little yellow flowers everywhere. And you're like, where did those things come from? That's what an exponent looks like. Chargers. Yeah. So actually this tails in perfectly to the last topic that we wanted to talk about, which is a bit of a rant about plugs. And why do we have only AC plugs in our houses when most of the devices we use today are direct current devices? So just so people understand, alternating current is the thing that runs, well, incandescent. It's the thing comes into your house, and the current actually goes like this. So it goes up and down, and if it's like 110 volts with 60 hertz, 60 times a second, it goes plus and then minus and plus and minus, and it goes like that. And you can actually run a clock off it. In fact, the old electric clocks that kind of go as they move, those things are just running right off the power grid. As opposed to that, direct current, which was Edison's baby back in the day, is just a current. So it just goes at whatever voltage it says it is. So things that use direct current are your phone, your laptop, the lights nowadays, all LED lights are direct current. Anything that has a USB charger, the Alexa device that you have, like, the thing that plugs into the wall this
with
thing here is pure USB.
Thing, the ring light.
Come on, a USB plug is doing this, so it's like can be plugged into my computer and it's got more than enough power to put out that much. And also, of course, things like this, microphones like mine and yours, those are USB. So if you look around, including your television sets, even the big TV sets nowadays, a lot of those just have a power brick that goes in between that converts to the DC voltage. So most of the items that are in your house today are direct current. And the problem with having AC feeding all of them is that every single one of them, and I don't have an example sitting here with me, is those power bricks. And every one of those power bricks is just a little transformer that's transforming alternating current to direct current and dropping the voltage to 8 volts, 12 volts, something like that, so that these things can operate on them. And that means it's just a waste, because when you transfer something from DC to AC, there's a loss. And when you transfer it from AC to DC, as you can feel, if you pick up those bricks, they get hot. And that heat is you're just paying money for nothing. You're paying money to heat the environment, which is your house, that then you have to air condition afterwards to reduce the temperature again. So it's just a completely self-defeating thing. So what we were going to talk about was, why not have a parallel standard to alternating current in your house that is direct current in your house? And even better, why not power that from solar panels on your roof if you have them? Because those are direct current. So why go through this process of changing it to alternating current to feed into your house where there's huge losses?
So yeah, take it away, Scott.
To feed it back. Yeah, I mean, this is something I thought about years ago when I was like noticing how heavy my computer was and realizing it's because of that big transformer that's in there, and realizing that, oh, all the TTL logic is using like 5 volts or something like that.
Right.
And I even brought it up to my brother, and he was like, oh, that's a crazy idea. You wouldn't want to do that. And he's a double E, so it's like, okay, I deferred to what he said. And the reason why you don't do direct current is because, it's the voltage drop. You're going to lose voltage. And the whole idea of AC, it's much easier to step it up.
Yes.
But you also get voltage drops with AC.
Right.
So
we should probably specify what you're talking about here. We're not talking about voltage drops in the range of the size of your house. We're talking about transmission lines, like the
over
things
long
that you see when you drive down the highway. Yeah.
And with really lousy wiring or something like that. But if you get lower resistance wiring and everything else, you can take care of that. And for what we're talking about within the house, you should be able to do that without a problem. And like not much longer after I said that, suddenly in Carnegie Mellon, they were starting to do that they actually had in their lab benches DC output way before USB ports. And I like pointed, was like, yeah, look, see, they figured it out because they didn't want to have all these power bricks and to be able to start supplying everything. And then eventually USB. So we already have that. We've got it built into a lot of our wall sockets now. You can go out and you can buy these deluxe plugs that have USB A already in there. So you can start plugging some of those things in. But there's still, I kind of wonder if I'm not using it, it's probably a vampire device. So I bet if you went through, you begin to realize that you turn everything off in the house, you're still using electricity just because those things are trying to do the conversion.
Yeah.
So again,
but again, that comes down to the fact that they have little tiny transformers inside them.
Yes, exactly. Little solid state transformers.
So the arguments against DC are, number one, it doesn't exist yet. There's not a standard, but there is a standard because we already have USB-C. So, we have a standard. Now, I would suggest that potentially, in order to make this more unique, you might want to have something that was a little bit different than that could whatever. But the beauty of this is that you can wire everything in the house with very, very small amount of copper for the DC outlets. And the outlets themselves could just have a little plug, like an Ethernet cable plug, where it just goes click. And so if you want to have a USB-C one, you go to Lowe's and you buy a little box and you plug it in, and it's none of that fiddly wiring with the really thick wires and turning off the power and trying to figure out which of the breakers controls that particular box and all of that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And that would handle low voltage things up to like laptops and stuff just fine. And then in the garage or something, you have a couple of high voltage DC direct that go to your car. And then you don't have, because right now, in order to charge your EV, you're getting AC off the grid and you're having to convert that to DC to then go into the car, because batteries, of course, are direct current. They don't have alternating current in them. And so there's just a power loss. So why not drive it directly with DC current straight into the car and give it, have a couple of these very high amperage DC direct currents so that you can charge your car up at effectively kind of supercharging speeds. Now, it doesn't have to be that crazy where it charges in an hour or something, but if you can do it in 2 to 3 hours, that's great. You can charge your car up real fast then overnight if you need to.
Especially if it's a clean run of wire.
Exactly.
In my house, it's going through, I don't know how many wire nuts to get to the car, between coming in from the meter, going to like one box, it goes upstairs to where the actual breaker box is. That goes down then to a junction box, which I don't quite understand. You open up that thing and it's like all these wires that are coming in there, all these twisted pairs together that go off to all sorts of other parts of the house. And it finally goes on out there. I'm thinking every one of those is a point of resistance that is getting warm as a result. So the current doesn't flow as well. Your wiring is longer than it needs to be. And then when you look in your plugs, I mean, never look behind the faceplate in any of your plugs, because it's kind of scary when you go in there. You see like all the sawdust and insulation that's in there, and you're kind of wondering what's going on, and everything is kind of bent around, and you're like, close your eyes, stuff it on in there, screw it in, and just don't think about it anymore.
Well, but it's also, it's because the wires are so thick because of what you have to run these things. And so if you've ever done that, you have to twist them with a pair of pliers. You have to like screw them back in, and then you're just jamming them into the wall. They don't want to bend in the way you want them to bend.
Because you don't have a good connector, and the way everything is run, and then everything's like a splice of a cable here, a splice of a cable there. And the other time is like, a lot of times you get wires running all over the place because, we got to get something that gets over to the light switch or to some junction box. So they're going off to different places to get these connected together, especially if you have like a light that's like a 3-position light. And it's like, oh, you're gonna run the wire over here. So there's all this excess running of stuff. And then again, your light bulbs, you switch all those fixtures out with your LED lights. And most of the LED light is the conversion of the AC to the DC and the high current. And that's where a lot of the heat comes from.
Right.
So you can already imagine that the bulbs are already extremely efficient. If you just had a direct DC, you'd be even way more efficient.
Right.
And you'd see your power bills go down. You wouldn't have to worry about them kicking off heat or anything else. I mean, LEDs are so efficient. The first problem they had when they started replacing traffic lights with them is that in places with wintry conditions, they would ice over, because it used to be that the incandescent lights get so warm. So they actually had to put heaters in these things. They learned the hard way. Like, holy cow, you get an ice storm and they freeze over. So that just shows that you get so much heat loss from incandescent that you're not. And then everything in your house will run much better. Your energy bills will go down. You get the wiring around. And I'm just thinking, if you have a lot of stuff more as like power over Ethernet, you won't have to run things around from a light switch to here and there. It's just like, maybe run it like the way they're thinking of building the Cybertruck. And in the next generation is like for a lot of these lower current applications, low voltage ones, just do it as power over Ethernet everywhere.
Right.
And then your light switch maybe isn't even connected to anything. It's just a simple little wireless, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of it. And so I think, for people who are thinking about this, the reason we were ranting is because the amount of wire in your house and high, I can never remember if it's high or low. Is it
the smaller the number, the higher the gauge, or the thicker the gauge?
Yeah. So it's like low gauge, but anyway, it's thick wire, and it's running a lot of stuff all the way through the house. And the fact of the matter is, if you were building new houses, you could put in just a tiny solar panel on the roof, just something that produces like a kilowatt hour, just nothing anymore. It would cost almost nothing to put in, and that could drive almost all of the direct current devices directly, at least during the day, especially if you put a small battery in the garage too, so that you could run all of these low amperage devices like laptops, like phones, like television sets, like lighting. All the lights in your house could be run through that. You don't need these screw-in lights anymore that they get hot. The LED lights get hot, but it's because of the transformers inside them that are converting AC current to DC current. And so if you got rid of all that stuff, you could run all of this on a very, almost like basically zero budget. Now, are the electric companies going to be super enthusiastic about this? Probably not, because they get a lot of money out of all of these heat loss items. But then, of course, what you do is you have AC for your dryer, for your refrigerator, for plugging in your vacuum cleaner when you need to do that. So there's probably like one AC outlet per room or something, your stove, right, oven, things like that, if you have an electric oven at least. So there's items that you would have AC for, but you just run those dedicated in, and you don't have to have, instead of having, I've got, oh my gosh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I've got 8 or 9 outlets in this room. Yeah. Right. So
which is
that's a lot of wire that's going all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if those 8 or 9 outlets were replaced by one AC outlet and every other one was DC, then you're saving just a bunch of copper. There's
it's
all wire.
It's mainly code. Like every 6 feet, you have to have an outlet by code.
Right.
And in many cases, they're always behind the bookshelf, they're behind the sofa. You can never get access to it.
1 and 2.
Yeah. Yes. And in theory, the reason that they are every 6 feet is because, extension cord fires and stuff like that. They don't want people running these long extension cords.
Right.
But the placement of those plugs is never thought out. Right. It's like one of them gets established, and then they're like, oh, we're within 6 feet. We got to put one here. We got to put one here. We're going to put one here. So if you start designing your rooms a bit better for all your services,
right,
plumbing included. So it would be really great. Maybe there are people that are thinking about how to build houses of the future, so that all these services and everything are really designed in from the beginning, where they're supposed to be, what kind of fittings you're going to have, things that just plug in very well, so you get really solid, good connections. Because I'm always afraid, and there are houses where there's a fire just because something happened to the connection in the socket, that you end up getting some arcing, and suddenly something catches fire. So you can come up with something that is a lot better, that literally plugs in and makes it easier for you to have expansion of your house. Yeah.
But I mean, just one very definite fact is, if you have something that's like maybe 5 amps DC or something, it's not going to catch fire. Like that's the thing, is that you're not dealing with high enough voltages and high enough amperages that you're going to have an arc or something that's going to, and it's just not going to heat up that much.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with a box that's like a wall outlet box, but just has just a plug, and it just, you go click and it just plugs in. And if there's a new standard that comes up and a new thing that replaces USB-C, you just buy the new outlets and you plug in that new outlet, and it's USB-D now. So yeah.
And I'm trying to think of, I'm looking around here, everything that's plugged in here. Is there anything in my office right now that really has a high power draw or that is actually AC? I think the only thing is I've got a ceiling fan, and I'm sure someone can figure out how to get that thing to work without having to be an AC motor. But everything else, all the computer equipment, all the displays, the VR, I mean, all that is that we're bringing in that 110 high amperage outlet for no reason. We're not drawing anywhere near it. Now, yeah, it's like, oh, if you're coming with a vacuum cleaner, you're going to need that. If you're coming with a blow dryer, you're going to need something like that. Okay, great. But when I'm just looking around here, I would like to have something which is low voltage.
Right. Now, I do have a desktop computer, and that's running AC, but that's the one item.
Right, because it has to. But how much does it actually draw?
I don't know. That's
watts?
actually an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if it was a high enough, yeah, because obviously it wants to run on DC current. It doesn't want to, it's got a transformer inside it. So,
and so it's part of the current draw is running the fans. And I wonder if the fan is to cool off the transformer, or actually part of it's to cool off the chips. But it's way below what a blow dryer is. So I had a pretty big laptop one time, and it had a super big brick.
Right.
And I think it might have been 400 watts or something like that. It was enough that I knew that when you went on an airplane and plugged it in, it popped the breaker every time. So I could never use it on a flight. Just so that's why it's nice to have something that's a bit more low current and energy efficient.
Yeah. But anyway, it's one of those things where when you're thinking about new standards, it really makes logical sense to build a DC only standard, because I would think that safely anybody who's watching this, that 80% of the things that are plugged in your house have a power brick attached to them. If you just start looking around, and that's including lights and stuff. If you've got LED lights, I mean, every single one of those has a little bit of a little bitty transformer in it. So I've got, I think it's 12 lights above me. Every single one of those is running off AC, but every single one of them has an AC to DC converter inside of it and LED lights.
And a lot of semiconductors, every single light bulb. There's a lot of chips in every one of them. Just for that one simple little light bulb, just to do that. And if you've got a couple in your fixture.
Right. Oh man, and think how much cheaper those light bulbs will get when you don't have to have all that circuitry.
Yeah. They'd be much cheaper, much cheaper.
And you don't even have to have the big giant screws anymore if you don't want to. Like you could they could be some sort of USB style, but like a more robust, so that it kind of, again, clicks into place. So instead of this whole thing where you're up there like doing this screwing around kind of stuff with hot light bulbs that are burning your fingers, it's a click and it just pops into place. And so maybe like a push pull, like a little push and it goes in, and a push again and it pops back out. I don't know, but something along those lines.
So I could just hear so how many know-it-alls does it take to plug in a light bulb? That's going to be in the future. So, oh, we don't plug it in; it just snaps in.
Right, or maybe a quarter turn lock. You push it into place and quarter turn it, and it just locks in place. That would seem like something very simple to do now. But it's just the amount of power that is being wasted in my house right now is just kind of unimaginable. Just like you said, all these little vampire devices that are just sucking down power, even if nothing's plugged into them, running the transformers. It's crazy. In terms of not just environmentalism, but also just from being a fiscally responsible human being. It's like, I wouldn't be able to put a dollar sign on it, but I'm sure it's more than $5 or $10 a month are wasted on these things. And that's a lot of money. That's just wasted.
Right. And if you start to think about how housing will be done in the future, you start getting more manufactured housing to design these things really well, that pretty soon your houses are almost going to be as well designed as, say, a car, where you really think everything is laid out and produced that way. And it's already happening that there are a lot of these factories that you're not aware of that are able to produce all the sections for your house. It's not a mobile home, but they're producing everything exactly to the design. and they're able to go out and set it up in one day.
Right.
And you wouldn't realize that it was a manufactured house, except when you start to go in and realize how perfect everything is. So the
Right.
walls come together at exactly 90 degrees. If you've got any strange joists, everything is there. Every nail is exactly centered on the stud because it's done robotically.
Right.
And when they think about how to build it up, and usually when these walls show up, all the services are already in there. So in the factory, they've installed all the outlets. It comes up and whoop, everything's down there. So they're already kind of doing that, except they have to use existing building code standards.
Right.
So if you start changing something, well, wait a minute, what if we go forward and start thinking about how we start producing these houses? We go a long way to making really nice houses. And I know there's going to be a lot of people complaining, like, oh, well, we like these nice. It's like, you'll still be able to do that because these factories are not producing the same house every time. The whole idea is that they're doing it custom, but rather than doing it on site, they're doing it off site in a really nice environmentally controlled situation with perfect tooling and machinery to do all that. And then you can put it out there. So you can still design really nice things. But now if you start thinking about designing for manufacturing and designing what's going to go in there, in the end, you're going to see something that's going to look the same, but behind the scenes, it's not going to be literally a rat's nest. Because you go into a lot of your walls, you open it up and go, ooh, there is a rat's nest in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to go from one extreme, like I lived in a house when I was growing up that was built in the 1920s, and it had like one electrical outlet per room, and they weren't even the 3-prong variety because it was very old. And it had the screw-in types of fuses that if you blew it, it actually took a period of time for it to burn through. So dangerous house. But the opposite extreme of this is what you're talking about, but boxable. I got a chance to visit with them at CES, and they're building entire prefabbed houses, but they're like Lego bricks. So each room is a perfect square or rectangle, but they are built to be, you can put them on top of each other, beside each other, and make really interesting houses out of it. But they also have runners. All the stuff is built, and
everything is designed.
Each one of those segments can be put on a semi truck, and that's cool. So, they just drive it there, plop it out, and it's done.
And so they're kind of the different extreme between the house that you've got a pile of lumber and you build it on site versus something which is really modular. And I think a lot of people are going to like that. That's intriguing to me that you can build something modular like that. And if you do have your services right, it really is plug and play. And then there's this middle ground where it looks like it was built on site, except you still are building everything, the framing, and it goes also in the back of a truck, stacked in the right order. It shows up, someone's already poured the foundation, and you're able to pull it off the back of the truck in the right order with a crane, drop it up there. And in one day, the whole house is closed up and sealed.
Right.
And you go inside and it's like, okay, we need to have the guys that come in to do the walls. It's like, nope, that was already done in the factory. It was already painted. You do the electrical? Nope, it's all there. Basically, it's almost ready to move in. Yeah. So there are huge advantages to being able to do that. So it goes up fast, it goes up very quickly, and you don't have to worry about weather getting in while you try to seal up the house. The house is already sealed and ready to go. So at that point, it's just moving in the furniture and some cabinetry and a few other things. And guess what? Your kitchen cabinets fit because the house is so perfect that you don't go in there like, oh, it's a little bit off here. We're going to put in a shim here and shim there and do some work. It's like everything fits perfectly.
Well, and those are the perfect candidates for starting to do these DC current lines into the house.
Exactly.
I don't think people need to wait for the government to regulate this. We've already got really nice standards with USB. But with the industry, there's only a few players in this space. Have them create something that's an interchangeable backplane connector so that you can make these boxes that are USB-C or whatever they are on the front, and they just have a really simple connector on the back, maybe power over the Ethernet, something like that. That might not be the most efficient thing because it's got a lot of data cabling and stuff too, but just something basic like that, and let the market make them.
You might have something close to that. So you might be more focused on the power versus the Ethernet.
Exactly.
The idea is a data communication to make it very easy for you to be able to turn things on and off.
Right.
So for your smart house and everything else, that way you don't necessarily have to have switches or plugs, or again, these wires that are going back and forth, just because you're trying to connect one thing to the switch in the house, and that's it.
Yeah. And of course, for smart houses and things like that too, a lot of having a wall switch on the wall that then runs up to the light is not going to be so necessary anymore, because you'll scream, you'll be like, light, turn off.
Yeah,
You know,
and
it's just,
you might still have a switch over there, but the thing is the switch is not connected.
yes, it's not connected. It's radio
It's not
controlled.
connected.
Yeah.
You're not having to run that. You may be running it. There's obviously some power switch coming on up, or some run a wire that gives it the power that it needs, and maybe do the connection. Then you just hit
Right.
that, it's done. So you could
Yeah.
see running all the wires would be a lot easier. So it'd just be a different power over Ethernet kind of standard.
Right. Right. But again, you know, it's there are still challenges because you have to figure out what the max amperage is. Like, what do you want to allow people to plug into these things? What sort of standards do you want? Well, but it seems like a lot of the work has already been done by the people that designed USB-C, you know, specifically because it handles a lot of amperage. So kind of design around that. Put it in the walls. The cables don't have to be that thick. You don't have a lot of danger of fire. You can get rid of a lot of the AC wiring. You don't have to have as many outlets anymore, although probably code is going to demand that at this point, but you know,
it'll demand some of it. But again, at some point we decided that 15 amps is the max.
right.
So somewhere around there, when it's like whatever kind of appliances people are going to use, that's going to be it. And everyone had to build their appliances to 15 amps.
Right.
But a lot of times those appliances are very inefficient compared to what we can do today. So you might be able to look at it and say, yeah, with a lot of this DC stuff, you know, maybe you can do everything with 5 amps. Maybe there's a way to come up with a ceiling fan that doesn't need the full 15 amps. I don't think it draws anywhere near 15 amps.
Right.
It's probably a lot less than that. So you could have these low power things that work. And again, just where you need, like in the kitchen, like there's a completely different standard for your stove. You know, it's called like the 220 or sometimes even 380, depending upon where you are. So we know that's something special. And your laundry, you've already got something special, but we don't have those big outlets throughout the whole house because we don't need them in the whole house. So why should every room have it? Maybe the bathroom needs something for the blow dryer or something else, but for the most part, you don't need that big thing.
Right. Which again is why I said for most rooms, aside from kitchen, bathroom, garage, probably just one AC outlet per room, unless it's just a huge room, would be perfectly adequate. Essentially, it should be the vacuum cleaner test. Can you plug it into this outlet and reach the whole part of the room with the vacuum cleaner?
Yeah, exactly.
With a 15-foot cord or whatever those cords are, you know, that if it can do that, then that's all you need to worry about. That's fine. And then just have one.
And the reason we have all the outlets in the house is like, oh, okay, I want to put a lamp over here.
Right.
And I need to have the TV here. I need to have it, but almost all of those now are really DC. And again, it's like the vacuum cleaner. You don't need to have all these plugs in the room for the vacuum. You just need to have one.
Right.
So what's the other? And that's not something permanent. You know, I can understand if you have something permanent, you want to have an outlet nearby.
Yes.
But what are you going to have that is drawing a lot?
Right.
The only thing might be someone comes up, oh, I need to have an electrical space heater.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to plug it in a certain corner or something like that. But outside of that, that's kind of rare. Most of the things are low power nowadays.
And even things like we have like a couch now because we're old that like does the electronic thing where the legs come up and there's a big brick and you plug it into the wall. You could easily run a low amperage just DC thing under the floor. It wouldn't be this crazy amount of work that it would take. And of course, if you're building new houses, just build in on the floor so that there's like a little piece of the wood that you just pop out and pop a little plate in there instead, you know, so you've got, because the wiring is less expensive and because you have a standardized connector, you can put a bunch of potentials in the room that people don't have to use unless they want them. And when they want them, you just go boop and you pop it up and there it is. And you plop a little plate on there. You plug the thing directly in. You don't have to have that big power brick. It just, you know, powers anything like a couch or something. So you don't have to have this stupid wires running across your floor and try to figure out how to hide them so that people aren't tripping over them as they walk behind them and stuff. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that was quite the rant.
Yes. I love rants.
Yeah.
Make it happen, industry. This needs to happen. It's a waste. It's wasteful.
Exactly. So,
and just all the power bricks that have to be manufactured. I mean, that's wasteful too. Yeah. Think about all of the savings of making all of those stupid bricks that wouldn't have to be made anymore. It's crazy.
Exactly. You're looking at EU, you know, they're coming up with something like that.
Hey, they should do that.
They're concerned about e-waste.
Exactly.
But we've worked on our everything bagel here. Did we, does it have everything in there? The checklist on the rant?
Yes, we got the rant. We got electricity.
We got the rant. We got the superchargers.
Right.
What else did we do? Oh, yeah, I think we did.
And we even got space in our t-shirts.
Yep, we got that in there somehow. Oh, so you might want to just mention that just to kind of finish it off. What, 6 to 8 weeks might be the
Yes.
next test launch?
So what are we looking at? So let's take 8 weeks. So around the middle of August, I guess, or early to mid-August. Yeah.
Early to mid-August is possible. Is that the height of mosquito season down there?
Oh gosh, I hope not. I was thinking about camping out at the KOA, but maybe not.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll have to see. Yeah.
Cool. Well,
No,
anyway, hopefully
that's
we'll see a
looking at-
bunch of people there if the
Yeah.
if that does happen in sometime around mid-August. So all
So
right. Well,
let's-
thank you so much for joining me. That was a lot of fun to talk about a whole bunch of things. It's been a while, and I appreciate having a chance to chat. And everybody,
same
follow
here.
Going Ballistic 5 on Twitter and follow my channel and do all that stuff. You know all the good stuff. Anyway,
Yep.
all right. Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate it, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye now.